Welcome to post-medieval Eastern Asia, 1500s to 1700s, Tokugawa Feudal Japan, and Imperial China. This is Melinda Klein. Despite China under the Ming Dynasty from active participation in maritime trade, when the Portuguese arrived in 1514, China was in command of a vast empire that stretched from the steppes of Central Asia to the China Sea, from the Gobi Desert to the tropical rainforests of Southeast Asia. A vigorous process was underway in neighboring Japan. A new political structure, the Tokugawa shogunate, brought power in the early 17th century and managed to revitalize the traditional system in a somewhat more centralized form that enabled it to survive for another 250 years. But major structural changes were taking place in Japanese society, and by the 19th century, tensions were growing as the gap between philosophies and realities were changing. Once in power, the Tokugawa attempted to strengthen the system that governed Japan for over 300 years. They followed the example of rulership that operated through a joint system. The first element is the coalition of the daimyo. These are Japanese warlords, and also with a council of elders. Under the Tokugawa, the system became more centralized versus localized. The national power now set policies that required implementation across Japan, thus creating a more unified rule and application of laws and practices. During the late 1500s, Ming rule in China was in decline due to a series of ineffective rulers leading to corruption, concentration of land ownership that would cause peasant rebellions. This would bring the Manchu to power. This was not universally accepted as they were ruthless rulers and insensitive to Chinese customs. The new government mandated new hairstyles for men and the way to dress. But in time, rulership became more accepting of social norms and Chinese practices. In Tokugawa Japan, while traditional Confucian-inspired beliefs continued along with the samurai warrior tradition, a new set of cultural values began to appear, especially in Japanese cities. These included the following three. 1. A rise in popular literature for a reading public. 2. The building of lending libraries. And 3. A primary aim being to divert attention and to amuse. In time, Japanese theater evolved. Kabuki became a commercial success. During the Ming and early Qing, China produced its last outpouring of traditional artistic brilliance. From the architectural redo of the Forbidden City, Beijing, bringing it to a grandiose scale with carved marble and gardens, and the decorative arts that flourished in this period. World-class Chinaware included Ming porcelain, as noted, very popular around the world. And illustrated here, you can see its delicate blue and white floral decorations. It took the Dutch over 100 years to learn how to produce porcelain as fine as the examples that were brought from China. Around 1400, a shapely curved sword produced by a very high level of craftsmanship that is today still highly regarded, emerged. Sword making required a lifelong commitment to the art and mystery of making these implements, while a variety of high-quality weaponry appeared during the Middle Ages. In regards to building and architecture, the imperial city in Beijing remained the most outstanding example. Built using the remnants from the Mongol occupation, during the Ming period, the renovations returned the capital to splendid glory by 1421. Emperors that followed continued to add to this palace, but the basic design has not changed much in the last 600 years. By the 1500s in Japan, a new poetry style emerged that helped to facilitate social interaction and communication. After later revised versions, this poetic style emerged in the 1700s as haiku, a condensed poem comprising of 17 syllables that embodied elegance, tranquility, and beauty. The family in China retained its importance for many of the same reasons as needed in earlier times. As a labor-intensive society based primarily on agriculture and the cultivation of rice, China needed large families to help with the harvest and to provide security for parents too old to work in the fields. In Tokugawa, Japan, the era saw the emergence of the nuclear family as the basic unit of Japanese society. In previous times, Japanese peasants had few legal rights. Now, with farm income on the rise, the nuclear family took on the same form as in China, however, with one significant difference. Once sons married in Japan, oftentimes they lived in their own households. By the 1590s, competing powers had centralized control of Japan, shifting it from localized control by powerful daimyo family leaders to themselves. In addition, sword hunts scoured the countryside for peasants who had armed themselves. In doing so, competing powers attracted the services and loyalty of Japanese warriors, noted as the samurai, the professional warrior. The Ming and Tokugawa initially opened their doors to European trade and missionary efforts. Later, however, Chinese and Japanese rulers became concerned about the corrupting effects of Western ideas and practices and attempted to protect their traditional societies from this foreign influence. In time, local Japanese authorities reacted to the coming of change brought in by Western influences. In 1587, a high-ranking Japanese leader issued an edict prohibiting further Christian activities. While missionaries and their activities were curtailed, Japanese involvement with trading and merchants continued. The Jesuits protested. The edicts remained in place. In time, Christian missionaries, including the recent arrival of the Spanish Franciscans, aroused more of a stir because the priests had begun to interfere with Japanese politics. While China closed her ports to trade with the outside world with the exception of Canton, Japanese authorities hoped to maintain commercial relations with European countries even while suppressing the Western religion.